Pokemon Fanfiction Novels presents The Gospel of Gold by G.S. Lewis. Prologue: The Parable of the Tower. An old and undying legend surrounded the burned tower of Johto's Ecruteak city. For 1.5 centuries, it had stood as a hollowed-out husk of what it had once been. Yet the people of Ecruteak refused to modernize and replace it, for they held faithfully to the old story that their forefathers had taught them. In the tower fire, 3 unknown Pokemon had tragically been caught and burned to death. Then came the Phoenix, Ho-oh, the Life Giver, who brought with her the fire of resurrection. Before the wondering eyes of men, she loosed a sacred pillar of golden flames upon the ashes. Out from the inferno leapt the 3 Pokemon, their lives rekindled, and their names made famous to the modern day. The Phoenix had been occasionally sighted for decades since the incident, but there was never empirical evidence to suggest her existence beyond the testimony of the beholders. Some even theorized that she hid herself out of anger. Nevertheless, the old story continued to hold sway in the lives and customs of the people, and they gave glory to the one who gave life. The story that follows is a testament to their faith and how it is sometimes rewarded. It was late one summer night that the peaceful stillness of Ecruteak was violently broken by wails of lamentation. Townsfolk peered timidly through their windows and doors and watched with astonishment as a man tore past their houses at full sprint. The dim lights made his features indistinct, but he bore a burden in his arms that was plainly his own size at the least. The weight of it seemed to have no effect on the man's manic speed, and though his breathing was labored, his cries never ceased. He did not slow down until he had reached his destination. It was as blackened and misshapen as it had been after the fire 150 years ago. But in this unsightly ruin, he laid down his burden with utmost care. As he stepped away, a glimmer of moonlight broke through the overhead clouds and shone upon the thing on the ground. It was a woman. Her features were slender and delicate, and her eyes were closed as if sleeping. Her belly, by contrast, was bulbous and stretched almost to bursting. There was no rise or fall of her chest. Indeed, she did not move at all. The man who had carried her stood over her for a moment, his own heavy breathing racked with sobs as he fought to recover his wind. Then he cried out, in a voice that could be heard from one end of the city to the other, "Life Giver! Life Giver! Have mercy! In 1 hour, I have lost both my wife and my son! My family! My family! For all my years, I believed that you can do the impossible! You can do what the doctors couldn't! I'm sure of it!" He threw himself upon his face, clawing his hair in agitation and gasping in great gulps of breath. When he rose again, his face and forearms were blackened with clinging soot. "Spare them!" he panted, his voice hoarse and no longer raised. "Spare them, and I will dedicate my son to you. He will be yours, to do your will and your work for as long as he lives. Hear your servant!" A wall of spiraling flames shot down from the clouds and encompassed the dead woman on the ground. As the man looked on in shock, he imagined he saw, for a fleeting moment, the outline of a great bird in the blaze. He blinked against the brightness of the flames, and the image was gone instantaneously, as was the pillar of fire. It had vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving only a pile of ashes in its wake. As the man stood on his shaking legs, rubbing his eyes in wonder at the miracle that had just transpired in front of him, something in the ashes caught his gaze. Something moved. With heart pounding in his ears and trembling fingers, he knelt and reached gingerly into the cinders. They were not hot, but emanated the gentle warmth of an egg recently set upon. The man felt something smooth, which wiggled at his touch. Slowly, he lifted the thing from the ashes and held it in his arms, staring at it. His stillborn, now firstborn, child. He cradled his babbling son securely to his chest and breathed a prayer of thanks to God. The boy lived once more.